Imagine spending your entire life savings on your students, only to walk into school one day and find 100 tech CEOs waiting for you. That's exactly what happened to Marcus Johnson after he used $25,000 to buy computers for his class. What these CEOs did next will leave you speechless. Watch this incredible story and subscribe to Seeds of Goodness. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Marcus Johnson stood in the computer lab of Westside High School, surveying the outdated machines with a mixture of frustration and determination. At 35, Marcus had been teaching computer science at this inner-city school for 7 years, watching technology advance at lightning speed while his classroom remained frozen in time. "Mr. Johnson, it froze again," called Deshaun from the back row, raising his hand. It was the third computer to crash in the last 15 minutes. Marcus made his way through the maze of desks. "Let's try restarting it one more time," he said, his voice maintaining the patience that had become his trademark. He pressed the power button, knowing that even if it rebooted successfully, the decade-old machine would struggle to run the basic coding program his students needed. Westside High served one of the poorest neighborhoods in the city. While schools across town had innovation labs with 3D printers and virtual reality stations, Westside made do with computers donated by corporations, upgrading their own systems, hand-me-downs that were already obsolete when they arrived. Yet despite the limitations, Marcus saw extraordinary potential in his students. They were creative, resilient, and hungry to learn, qualities he recognized because he had once been in their shoes, a black kid from a struggling neighborhood who found his path through technology. After the final bell rang and his students filed out, Marcus remained in the empty lab, staring at a college brochure that Jasmine Matthews, his most promising student, had left on her desk. MIT. It was her dream school, and she had the intelligence to succeed there. But without proper technological resources and advanced coding experience, her application would be at a severe disadvantage. Jasmine had already accomplished remarkable things with limited tools. Using just her phone and the school's spotty Wi-Fi, she had created a basic app that connected elderly residents in their neighborhood with volunteer helpers for errands and home tasks. The local community center was already using it, despite its rudimentary interface and occasional glitches. What could she create with actual resources? Marcus wondered aloud in the empty room. That evening, instead of heading home, Marcus drove to the district administration building for the monthly budget meeting. He had submitted a proposal for updating the computer lab, a modest request compared to what the school truly needed, but still substantial enough to make a difference. "I'm sorry, Mr. Johnson," the district financial officer said, not looking particularly sorry at all as he shuffled through papers. "We simply don't have the funds this quarter, perhaps next year." It was the same answer he'd received for 3 consecutive years. On the drive home, Marcus passed a big-box electronics store, its windows advertising a sale on laptops. He pulled into the parking lot on impulse, walking inside just to look, to see what possibilities existed beyond the dated machines in his classroom. "Can I help you find something?" asked a sales associate. "Just browsing," Marcus replied, but found himself drawn to a display of sleek, powerful laptops, machines that could run the latest programming software, handle machine learning applications, and open doors to cutting-edge computer science. The price tags made him wince. Even with the sale, each laptop cost nearly $1,500. For a proper classroom set, he would need at least 15. His mind did the math automatically. $20,500. An impossible sum for the school district, but not, perhaps, for him personally. Marcus had been saving diligently for years. After putting himself through college and graduate school, he had accumulated substantial student loan debt, but had also managed to set aside money for eventually buying a home. His modest apartment had a leaky roof and plumbing issues, but he had been living frugally, building his savings account to just over $25,000. It was meant to be his down payment, his step toward the American dream of homeownership. As he stood in the electronics store, surrounded by technology that his students could only dream of accessing, Marcus made a decision that would change not only his life, but the lives of his students. The following Monday, Marcus arrived at school earlier than usual, accompanied by the store manager who had helped him process his massive purchase over the weekend. Together, they unboxed 15 high-performance laptops in the computer lab, setting them up before the first bell. When his advanced class filed in later that day, the student stopped in the doorway, staring in disbelief at the gleaming new machines. "Are these ours?" asked Tyrone, his eyes wide. "They're on loan from a private donor," Marcus replied, not yet ready to reveal the complete truth. "But yes, they're for your use." Jasmine approached her assigned station slowly, almost reverently. "Mr. Johnson, this can run TensorFlow," she whispered, scrolling through the pre-installed software. "We can actually build real machine learning models now." The joy on their faces made the dent in his savings account seem inconsequential. That afternoon, Marcus called his landlord to explain that the roof repairs would have to wait another few months. He also signed up to drive for Uber on weekends, a necessary step to rebuild some of his depleted savings. Word spread quickly through the small school. By lunchtime, the principal, Dr. Wallace, appeared in his classroom doorway. "Marcus, can I speak with you privately?" In her office, Dr. Wallace fixed him with a searching look. "These new computers, the serial numbers show they were purchased 3 days ago. The district certainly didn't buy them." Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I had some savings." Dr. Wallace's expression shifted from suspicion to disbelief. "You spent your personal money on classroom equipment? Marcus, that must have cost—" "It doesn't matter what it cost," he interrupted gently. "What matters is what these kids can do with the right tools." After a long pause, Dr. Wallace spoke softly. "This is above and beyond, even for you. The school can't possibly reimburse." "I'm not asking for reimbursement," Marcus said. "I'm asking for permission to expand the coding curriculum now that we have the hardware to support it." That evening, Marcus introduced a special project to his advanced class. "I want each group to develop an application or website that addresses a real need in our community," he explained. "Think about the problems you see every day and how technology might help solve them." The students broke into teams, buzzing with excitement as they brainstormed. Jasmine immediately expanded on her elderly assistance app, planning improvements with her newly formed team. Another group decided to create a platform connecting students with scholarship opportunities, addressing the information gap that kept many West Side graduates from pursuing higher education. As Marcus moved between groups, offering guidance and encouragement, he felt a certainty that his financial sacrifice had been the right decision. Money could always be earned back. But opportunities, especially for kids who had so few, were precious and fleeting. Over the next few weeks, Marcus worked alongside his students, staying late after school almost every day. He taught them version control with GitHub, proper documentation practices, and user experience design principles, things that had been theoretical before but were now practical necessities as they built their projects. Jasmine's team developed their app into something truly impressive. They added geolocation features, a verification system for volunteers, and an elegant user interface that even seniors with limited tech experience could navigate easily. They named it NeighborLink and presented it to the community center, where it was received with enthusiasm. When all the projects were complete, Marcus helped the students upload their work to GitHub repositories and encouraged them to share their accomplishments. He took photos of the teams with their finished projects and posted them on Twitter with the hashtag #KidsCanCode. "Proud of my students at Westside High," he wrote. "With the right resources, there are no limits to what they can create." He added the tweet to the growing collection of digital memories he was accumulating, small victories in the ongoing battle to provide his students with the education they deserved. Little did he know that this simple social media post would set in motion events beyond his wildest imagination. A gift from Silicon Valley. Part 2. Marcus's tweet might have remained in the obscure corner of the internet reserved for proud teachers had Aisha Reynolds not happened across it. As a technology reporter for TechCrunch with over 500,000 followers, Aisha had been researching an article on the digital divide in education when the #KidsCanCode hashtag caught her attention. The thread of student projects impressed her, but what truly captured her interest was a reply to Marcus's original post. "Amazing work. How did your school afford such high-end equipment for these projects? Our district is still using computers from 2010. Marcus had responded honestly. I purchased these laptops with my personal savings. The talent was always there. They just needed the tools. Aisha immediately reached out for an interview. 2 days later, her article went live on TechCrunch's front page. Teacher spends life savings on laptops for underprivileged students. Creates coding prodigies. The story detailed Marcus's sacrifice and highlighted the apps his students had created, particularly Jasmine's NeighborLink. Within hours, the article had been shared thousands of times across social media platforms. By the following morning, local news vans were parked outside Westside High. "Mr. Johnson, how does it feel to see your story go viral?" asked a reporter, microphone thrust toward Marcus as he tried to make his way into the building. "I appreciate the attention if it highlights the incredible work my students are doing," he replied carefully. "But this isn't about me. It's about giving talented kids the resources they deserve." Inside, the school was buzzing. Students from other classes were stopping Jasmine and her classmates in the hallways, asking about their projects and the sudden media attention. Dr. Wallace had called an emergency staff meeting to discuss how to handle the publicity. "This could be a real opportunity for Westside," she told the assembled teachers. "Marcus has inadvertently shone a spotlight on the resource gap that exists in our educational system." By the end of the school day, Marcus had been contacted by 3 national news networks and 2 major newspapers. His inbox overflowed with messages from teachers across the country sharing similar stories of making do with inadequate resources. There were also emails from tech professionals. Some offered to mentor his students remotely. Others asked how they could donate equipment to the school. A few even expressed interest in Jasmine's app, suggesting it had commercial potential. "This is insane," Marcus told Dr. Wallace as they reviewed the day's developments in her office. "I never meant to start a movement." "Sometimes the most powerful movements begin with one simple action," she replied. "You did what you thought was right. Now others want to follow your example." What neither of them knew was that the story had also captured the attention of someone with the power to transform their school entirely. Sarah Chen, CEO of Neuraleap AI, had built her artificial intelligence company from a dorm room project into a billion-dollar enterprise in just 7 years. At 34, she was one of the youngest female CEOs in Silicon Valley, and one of the few women of color in such a position. She had never forgotten her own public school education and the one teacher who had recognized her potential in computing. When Sarah read about Marcus Johnson, she saw a kindred spirit. More importantly, she saw an opportunity to address a systemic issue in tech, the persistent lack of diversity stemming from unequal access to technology education. She immediately texted her friend Miguel Sanchez, CEO of Code Future. "Seen the story about the teacher who bought laptops with his savings? We should do something." Miguel's response was immediate. "Already on it. Conference call in an hour with some others who want to help." That evening, a video call connected the heads of some of the most influential technology companies in America. Sarah had expected perhaps a dozen participants. Instead, there were over 50, with more joining by the minute. "I didn't realize my Rolodex was this powerful," she joked, as the gallery view expanded to include CEOs from major hardware manufacturers, software giants, and venture capital firms. "This story struck a chord with a lot of us," said Miguel. "We talk about diversity in tech, but we don't do enough to address the root causes. Most of these companies have diversity initiatives with multi-million-dollar budgets," added Raj Patel, founder of Cloud Secure. "But they're not moving the needle because they're focused on college recruitment, when the pipeline problem starts much earlier." For the next 2 hours, the technology leaders debated how best to respond. Some suggested simply donating equipment to Westside High. Others wanted to establish a scholarship fund for Marcus's students. A few advocated for a broader initiative addressing technology education in underserved communities nationwide. "All good ideas," Sarah said, "but I think we need to do something immediate and tangible for this specific teacher and these specific students first. Something that shows we're not just throwing money at a problem, We're investing in people. By the end of the call, they had a plan. Sarah would coordinate with the school, while the others pooled resources. They set an ambitious timeline. Everything needed to be in place within 1 week. The following morning, Sarah called Westside High and asked to speak with Dr. Wallace. "I'm interested in visiting your school to discuss a potential technology partnership," she said, deliberately vague. "Would next Monday be convenient, Dr. Wallace?" Unaware she was speaking to one of the most powerful women in technology, agreed to the meeting. Sarah requested that it be kept confidential, explaining only that she represented interested parties in the technology sector. Over the next 5 days, Sarah coordinated a logistical miracle. She secured commitments from CEOs, arranged for equipment deliveries that were stored in warehouses near the school, and worked with a local event planner who was sworn to secrecy. Her team produced legal documents at record speed, setting up a non-profit foundation to manage the forthcoming donation. Meanwhile, Marcus continued teaching, oblivious to the storm about to break over Westside High. The media attention had begun to fade, and he was grateful to return to some semblance of normalcy. The weekend Uber driving shifts were taking a toll. He'd fallen asleep at his desk twice that week, but seeing his students excel with their new equipment made the exhaustion worthwhile. On Friday afternoon, Dr. Wallace pulled him aside after the final bell. "Marcus, I need you to make sure your students are present for a special assembly on Monday morning," she said, an unusual tension in her voice. "I can't tell you much, but it's important that your computer science class be there in full." "Is everything okay?" he asked, concerned by her cryptic manner. "Everything is fine," she assured him. "Just prepare to be surprised." That weekend, as Marcus drove late-night Uber shifts around the city, trucks discreetly delivered equipment to Westside High. Security personnel, hired specifically for this purpose, kept watch as workers transformed the school's aging auditorium with lighting, sound systems, and a stage setup worthy of a tech product launch. And in hotels across the city, CEOs and technology leaders from across the country checked in, preparing for what many of them had begun calling Operation Code Future. Monday morning arrived with an unusual energy at Westside High. Students whispered about the mysterious assembly as they filed into the auditorium, which had been closed for maintenance over the weekend. Marcus guided his computer science class to the front rows as instructed, noting with curiosity the professional lighting and sleek stage setup that had replaced the school's typically modest assembly space. "Do you know what's going on?" Jasmine whispered. Marcus shook his head. "Your guess is as good as mine." The lights dimmed, and Dr. Wallace walked onto the stage. "Good morning, Westside. Today is an extraordinary day for our school. We have some special guests who were inspired by the dedication of one of our teachers and the incredible potential of our students." The side door opened and Sarah Chen walked onto the stage. Though most students didn't recognize her, Marcus's jaw dropped. He had read about the Neuraleap AI founder in tech magazines. "Thank you, Dr. Wallace," Sarah began. "I'm Sarah Chen, and I'm here because a few weeks ago, I read about a teacher who believed so deeply in his students that he spent his life savings to give them the tools they needed to succeed." The spotlight shifted to Marcus, who sat frozen in surprise. "Mr. Johnson, would you join me on stage?" In a daze, Marcus complied. As he reached the stage, the side doors opened again, and a stream of people entered. Men and women in business attire filled the wings of the stage, until nearly 100 individuals stood behind Sarah. "These are the CEOs and founders of some of the most influential technology companies in the world," Sarah explained. "And every one of us was moved by your story." Murmurs swept through the auditorium as students began to recognize some of the faces, leaders whose companies had created the software and devices they used daily. "Mr. Johnson invested in you," Sarah continued. "Now, we want to invest in all of you." She turned to Marcus. "We've created the Future Code Foundation with an initial investment of $10 million dedicated to Westside High School." The auditorium erupted. Marcus steadied himself against the podium as Sarah outlined the details. A state-of-the-art technology center to be built on campus, college scholarships for every student in the computer science program, paid summer internships at top tech companies, and funding to expand the program to other schools in the district. And for you, Mr. Johnson, Sarah said, turning to him directly, we're establishing the Marcus Johnson Teaching Fellowship with a $1 million endowment to ensure you can continue your work without financial sacrifice. Tears welled in Marcus's eyes as the students gave him a standing ovation. Dr. Wallace embraced him, whispering, "You deserve this." When Marcus finally spoke, his voice was steady despite his emotion. I never expected recognition for doing what any teacher would do, believing in their students. The real heroes are these kids, who created amazing things when given just a fraction of the resources that other schools take for granted. He looked directly at his computer science students in the front row. This opportunity isn't just about you. It's about all the students who will come after you and all the communities that will benefit from your innovations. Technology should be a bridge, not a barrier. The ceremony concluded with Sarah inviting Jasmine and her team to demonstrate their NeighborLink app. As the young programmer confidently presented to a room full of tech executives, Marcus felt a profound sense of vindication. His students had always had the talent. They had just needed someone to remove the obstacles in their path. Later, as the auditorium emptied, Marcus found himself surrounded by his students, all talking excitedly about the future. Jasmine pulled him aside, her eyes bright with tears and determination. "Mr. Johnson," she said quietly, "someday I'm going to be the one coming back here with the $1 million check. I promise." He smiled, knowing with absolute certainty that she would.